Before we begin, we'll take a few minutes to explain how to use the GoToWebinar technology. In particular, I'm going to show you some of the features that allow us to make our presentation more interactive. You should see the control panel pictured on your screen right now. If you don't, it's because it has been minimized, and you can pull it back out by going to the Grab tab, which hides and shows the control panel. There is also an attendee list where you can see all of the participants on the call. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the control panel, and I can unmute your line. Another way to participate is through the question pane. You can type your question in the question pane, and I can read it to the group or respond privately. All the panes can be expanded or minimized by clicking on the plus or minus buttons that are at the top left of each pane. In the past, we've had some audio trouble. It is for some reason you're having difficulty being heard. You will want to make sure that you're not muted on your personal phone and that you've entered the audio pin provided to you at the beginning of the call. If that doesn't work, you can hang up and call back in, and be sure to enter the audio pin. I will now turn it over to Lisa Nitsa, who will begin our presentation.
Welcome. We have a terrific group joining us for this webinar and a very important topic that we're covering. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on Achieving the Dream's YouTube channel following the webinar. I'm going to start by introducing the Achieving the Dream staff. I'm Lisa Nitsa, the Vice President for Strategic Partnerships. Caitlin Donnelly, you were just hearing from, who is the Coordinator of Strategic Partnerships. Carrie Henderson, who is with us, is the Associate Director of Programs and Policy, and Melanie Mulvey, the Assistant Director of Programs and Policy. All of us have been working with the presenters that you will be hearing from today, and are just thrilled to be presenting this webinar. The agenda for today is going to be a quick discussion about how and why Achieving the Dream has decided to launch this series. We'll introduce our panelists, and they will then take 20 minutes making a presentation. They are going to be talking about advancing student success through improved scheduling. And then we'll have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Again, you will be able to either raise your hand or type a question, and we will try to get to all of the questions. And any that we are not able to get to, there will be contact information for the presenters that you can follow up with them on. We'll then talk about the next technology solution webinar and close out the conference. Achieving the Dream decided to launch this series because we were realizing that increasingly our colleges in the network were finding that in their pursuit of student success and completion goals, they were often turning to technology to help somewhere along the way. And we felt that it was a wonderful opportunity for us to launch a series where we could have network colleges talking to their peers about challenges that they had faced, how they had overcome those challenges or were in the process of addressing them, and where technology did play an effective role in helping them improve outcomes. And so today we have an opportunity to be hearing from Dr. Victoria Sestecchi-Perez, who is the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost of Montgomery County Community College. Montgomery County Community College has been a leader college in our network since 2011. That is one of our designations for colleges that are achieving their goals faster and going further than one could have hoped. And they are also a co-winner of our 2014 Leah Meyer Austin Award, our most prestigious award in the network for advancements in student success and completion initiatives. And Dr. Perez will be, Becky Perez will be joined by Tom Shaver, who is the founder and CEO of Astra Information Systems. And that's a company that is located in Kansas, and you'll hear about the technology solutions and strategies that they have provided and been working with Montgomery County Community College on. Again, after the presentation, we'll open up the call for questions. But at this point, what I'll do is ask Dr. Becky Perez to start us off.
Thank you. I'm delighted to share with you today a case study, an initiative that we've been working on in partnership with Astra for some time. And really at the heart of this initiative is student access and success. And that's been our primary goal and our primary focus when we've been looking at improved scheduling. We're looking to improve the student pathways as well as secondarily enhancing resource efficiencies. First, I want to talk a little bit about Montgomery County Community College and who we are as an institution. As noted, we are a leader college with Achieving the Dream, and we've been part of this national initiative since 2006. Certainly, our college has had at the heart of our mission and our values student access and success since 1964 at our inception. This year, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary throughout this calendar year, and we're delighted to be able to share with you some of the strategies that we're using today, not only to meet our current student needs, but thinking forward into the future. We are about 20 miles west of Philadelphia, and we have two full-service campuses, one in Bluebell, and our West Campus located in the heart of Pottstown, which is part of a revitalization and economic development driver for that community. We also have other off-site teaching and learning facilities. We have a new Culinary Arts Institute in Towamencin, and that was opened last year. We also have a bolstering, booming virtual campus where we provide an array of online courses, programs, and services. We have a Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, as well as a lot of off-site locations where we're providing delivery. The last thing I wanted to share about our portfolio with you is a little bit about our enrollment facts. We have an integrated academic portfolio where we boast within our academic divisions both credit and non-credit. We serve last year more than 21,000 credit students and nearly 7,000 non-credit students. Certainly our mission as a community college is to serve our county residents, but we also provide a regional presence. We have an array of offerings, nearly 100 different programs of studies at the associate degree, certificate, post-baccalaureate, or specialty certificates, as well as certificates of completion. We have 44 areas of study that we focus on, and our primary areas in this region are STEM programming, health science programming, as well as business and industry. Today's presentation, I'm really going to focus on our improving the program pathways, as I said, as well as enhancing our resource efficiencies through our partnership with Astra. We've been delighted to be a partner with them by all evidence since 2001 when we began with a modest scheduling package with them. And this particular initiative, the inception came about during one of our every 3 to 5 years what we call tech tune-ups, where we had the opportunity really to do a deep dive into our scheduling practices to learn about where we've been and opportunities for improvement. Again, always focusing at the student and keeping the student at the heart and center. This time, though, when Tom and I and my colleagues had conversation, we talked about, instead of looking retrospectively effectively at our classroom utilization and our student performance from a pathway perspective, that let's be a little bit proactive and predictive. So we did it, I have a health science background, we looked at it as our preventive tune-up, if you will. So what we did is we looked at our scheduling for our 2011 spring semester, and we reviewed the schedule before it was released to students for registration. So we looked at opportunities prior to enrollment into those sections. So that was the approach that we used, and we found it to be a more beneficial approach. We could be much more proactive instead of being reactive as an institution, and that we could ensure that we had the proper placement of courses, the proper pathways, and certainly in this economic time that we were sensitive to resource allocation. So when we look at resources, I'm looking at anything from facilities utilization to staffing of courses to resources for student support services. The guiding principles that we used for our schedule development was our strategic plan to 26. Again, at the heart of the student access and success, looking at the student experience through a different lens and focus, and looking outside of academia for best practices through design thinking. We also have to be sensitive and ensure that we have curricular relevance and innovation in our delivery. Academic affairs at this institution has gone through a substantial renewal of our portfolio, trying to simplify the offerings that we have, ensuring that we have clear pathways to the workforce, to our industries in this region, as well as always being sensitive to our transfer partnerships. We also were very sensitive to acceleration. Part of our Achieving the Dream initiative and our annual work plan is acceleration, particularly in the area of developmental education. But we looked more holistically at acceleration, not only through developmental education, but through completion. So that would be through continuous programs of study through 12 months out of the year, making sure our offerings are available to students in that regard. It could also be of how we are placing courses. We have 6-week accelerated sessions. We have 10-week sessions. What course is following what course in a sequence? We also were very sensitive to our highly enrolled courses, those that directly relate to our programs of study. In 2011, we launched a new comprehensive competency-based general education core curriculum, so we had to ensure that those offerings were represented adequately in our schedule, and also being sensitive to our transfer partners. As I mentioned previously, pathway alignment was very important, that our programs of study were complete for both full and part-time students, that we were sequencing courses appropriately, and that we had continuous study options for our students. We also had to keep in mind, because we were going through a strategic planning process in academic affairs and a transformation integrating credit and non-credit into the portfolio, that we had to be sensitive to new opportunities and new products that would be coming in the pipeline. First and foremost, in 2011, we had to establish our baseline data. So we looked to how the balance of our courses were, how our courses were aligned in comparison to what courses were in demand by students. We also looked at our fill ratios, the number of students enrolled in comparison to what our capacity was. And then we began to categorize the portfolio into opportunity buckets. We had reductions where we believed that a percentage of our sections could be reduced. We had some that we felt could be fully eliminated. And then also we had opportunities to add additional sections based on our fill ratios and capacities. It's important that when we were looking at this data and when we began the conversations college-wide with our staff, our faculty, and our faculty leaders that we were talking about the data as a guide. We are a data-informed institution, but it is not driving the decision 100%. And I want to be very clear about that, that we really use the data to begin and to continue conversations. We weren't simply going to the data saying, okay, we had 311 reduction candidates, let's remove them all from the portfolio. That was not what our intention was. It was the impetus for conversation. And this is one tool that we use with human intervention. Out of that analytics began a whole array or a suite of analytics tools that Academic Affairs developed in concert with our information technology and our institutional research area. And we continue to have that internal cross-functional collaboration. And these tools are the tools that we're currently using to help us with our scheduling. We use scheduling tools so that when we are building schedules, and I'll share with you samples of each of these tools, we have our smart coding grid, a grid that we've been using for many years at the institution, but what we found in the initial baseline data review is that we tended to go off the grid. And when you go off the grid, even for a class, for 5 minutes, it can take a room offline for an entire academic semester. So we came back to the notion of let's go back to our grid and take a look at our grid. We also have a process now for adding courses, deleting or modifying from those active courses that have previously run. We've also developed a contact time calculator because we are offering courses not only for full semester, which is 14 weeks plus finals. We offer 6-week accelerators graded. We have a 3.5-week accelerated winter session. We offer 10-week courses. We offer 12-week courses. So we have a whole array of course offerings. To ensure that we have adequate seat time or clock time, we've developed our own contact time calculator, again, as a guide to help our faculty when they're scheduling courses. We've also reformatted some of our internal reports that we use, our CESAR report, that we're looking at courses across the institution at all campuses, all locations, and all deliveries to make the information more meaningful and user-friendly for all involved. We also certainly use our Astra recommendations and look at those very closely as far as reductions, eliminations, or additions. We now have a push report that we've customized, which is a fill ratio report that tells us for each course, for each discipline, what our total capacity is. So we're not just looking at singular entities or singular sections. And then we do a deep dive validation before we release a course with a cross-functional team of faculty, advisors, counselors, enrollment services, instructional designers, information technology, and all entities, including finance at the institution, to ensure that we have the best built schedules. Our smart grid is pretty simple in that we provide certain days, times, for scheduling of courses. One of the opportunities that we found in our former iteration as compared to our current iteration is we were seeing that students were not enrolling as much in our evening courses that were meeting 1 day a week. We were hearing from students that that was too much for them to digest, to only come to class 1 day a week. So what we did is took the opportunity and information from students, both what they provided to us as information as well as based on behavioral patterns of enrollment, is we kept the 1 day a week courses, but we also nestled 2 additional evening courses, an hour-and-a-half sections each. So they would be, for example, Monday and Wednesday for an hour-and-a-half instead of Monday for 3 hours and Wednesday for 3 hours. And that has helped to provide opportunities for students. They take 2 classes within those time blocks. They're still coming to class twice a week, but they seem to be performing better in those particular courses. Our smart code system also is translated. We translate that on what does that look like on a daily basis at the institution and how that nestling works. We have that grid provided here to show you the complexities of it. When you drill down and actually look at how we're scheduling it, it's fairly efficient because of the non-overlapping sections and times. As I mentioned previously, now when a coordinator or a dean is going through the process of adding additional sections or deleting or modifying the schedule, we have a vetting process that we go through academic affairs. I have an assistant dean of academic affairs who is my analytics specialist, and he takes a look at that request in relationship to the overall schedule. So we look at if we delete that Accounting 105 course in that certain time slot, we don't just look at the course, we look at how is that going to impact the overall scheduling. The scheduling of the accounting student, the overall opportunities for electives or core courses for our highly enrolled majors such as liberal studies or business administration. The time calculator has been something that we've been sharing at various venues and various conferences where you simply put in the number of weeks, the number of credits, and it will calculate for you the approximate number of contact hours based on our standards of practice. So this tool really has been something that we kept sort of under wraps initially from an academic perspective, and then have dripped it out over time to our coordinators, and they actually love it. It makes their lives easier now that they have a calculator to use as a guide to help them figure out the contact instruction, particularly for those flexible learning options. And certainly we have a comprehensive major project plan with master timelines that helps drive all of our analytical tools and all of our processes so everyone is aware, it's clearly communicated to our staff, our administrators, and our faculty of what's happening next and what's on the horizon so that everyone can be a player. And finally, the Astra recommendations were really critical for us having those conversations. Looking at the schedules, Astra was able to help us look at particularly our prime times, our Monday through Friday schedule between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m., and also our prime times in the early evening from 3 to 6 p.m. And they were help us to realize some efficiencies that we were able to be made. There are some courses that come up on our additions or reductions that we're not able to adjust. But again, we use this recommendation as a guide. The fill ratio report we push out on a weekly basis by campus. And the first set of data that you see is for our central campus. It's just to give you a sampling for Accounting 150. We have a seat count, we have a capacity, and it's telling us we're at 90% capacity. If we see anything at 70% and more, we have deep conversation as to should we add an additional section. Some cases we do, some cases we don't. And that's a push report that goes automatically. We also do our schedule validation, where we look at our schedule with a comprehensive cross-functional team from all entities of the institution to help ensure that we're building schedules for part-time and full-time students so that they can accelerate through completion and to be able to make sure that they're as conflict-free as possible. This has been a 3-year journey for us, and this is in phase 1 was our learning phase where we just got our feet wet. We went after, as one would say, the low-hanging fruit. We went in the second year into a more centralized practice where academic affairs oversaw a lot of the scheduling, took a very hands-on approach, followed our guiding principles and began developing this culture of evidence. And now we've empowered others and have an integrated planning process and have decentralized the process. Early on, the indicators are statistics. When we looked at our fall 10 to our fall 13 statistics, our enrollment or our fill for classes had increased. Our average sections have increased. And most notably and most remarkably, we've offered fewer sections, in that case 543 fewer sections, and still had increases in efficiencies for students. Early indications for fall 14 are showing that we have 1,867 sections at the present time. We still have a flexible learning on the horizon, so that may change slightly. Our average section enrollment is continuing to climb. It's nearing 17. We are nearing the 70% fill ratio at this point. And it's interesting because when you look at fall 2010 to fall 14 to date, we had 7.76% reduction in the number of sections, which is 700 sections, but yet we still had an increase of enrollment per section and an increased fill ratio. One of the things we were concerned about institutionally, I was concerned about as the provost, was creep, section creep, where sections start coming back into the schedule that perhaps were not relevant to a program of study or were not focusing on our guiding principles, and we have not realized that. So I'm happy to report that. I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. And really, I think what I'd like to do is just briefly touch on some statistics that are kind of industry-wide for two-year colleges. We have a growing database of peer metrics that really allows institutions like Montgomery County to contextualize what they're seeing in their benchmark findings and the progress that they're making. The overarching goal, though, is to really deal with all of the complexity and the volatility in the scheduling process and try to meet students' needs through all of that. Unfortunately, often in our industry, that complexity and that volatility is kind of glossed over in a roll-forward scheduling process that does not infuse a lot of data into the changes being made to the schedule. And we obviously believe that that's a critical part of addressing students' needs with increasingly more constrained faculty and space resources. So depending on whether a school is growing or whether a school has plateauing or even slightly shrinking enrollments, we feel like, and we've seen over and over again, that infusing analytics into the scheduling process can allow schools to align schedules to students, and then by doing that, be much more efficient, especially with their adjunct instructional spending. Also can look at how course scheduling really interacts with the room assignments so that we're dealing with both of them kind of together in a more synergistic kind of a way. If we look at kind of industry standards very quickly, what we see is that as an industry, we don't do a great job of aligning schedules to students' needs. So this graph looks at what we call a balanced course ratio. The idea is that most of our clients want their enrollments to be between about 70 and 95% of the total seats offered on a course-by-course basis on any given campus. Over 95% is typically a problem because the census dates where we measure that fill rate really has some attrition by that point, so we don't want them overfilled. So on the previous slide, really quickly, if you don't mind, what we're seeing is that that few courses are actually balanced. Only 32% are actually in that 70 to 95% fill rate. That's a little higher at community college at 36%, but the problem of underfilled courses is a major, major problem, which you can see that Montgomery County has done a very nice job of addressing with their statistics. But the industry average is that almost 50% of the courses on a typical community college campus are underfilled. So if we move right along on the next slide, that translates to an average for two-year colleges fill rate in courses of 74%, which is industry-wide on average 22 students enrolled in a typical class with a 30 cap. That's percentages, again, 74% at community colleges. So there is capacity available to meet students' needs. There also is classroom capacity. On average, a typical classroom industry-wide is used 48% of a standard week, but only 40% of the time at a typical community college. So most institutions that we work with that may be convinced, and many of them are, that they're out of space and out of faculty resources, actually have available bandwidth to meet students' needs if it's applied more intelligently. And then lastly, as Vicki mentioned, looking at the change opportunities in the schedule, on average about 80% of a schedule is truly statistically needed by students. And then the balance are multiple offering courses that might be slightly reduced. So if we're offering 12 sections of a course and we only need 8, then that could be addressed as a reduction candidate, or boutique type courses that are very low enrollment single offering courses that if not needed for a program of study as a requirement might not be offered at all. So those are the basic statistics that we look at and we try to address, but the overarching thing, as Vicki mentioned, is meeting students' needs. Noel Levitz, in their annual survey of student satisfaction, every year when they survey students, confirms that their #1 challenge is their experience at registration. When they show up at registration, they can't get the courses they need conflict-free, and many of the courses they need aren't even offered when they're available relative to their work schedule. So we're trying to use data to address those issues, and we feel like, bias admitted, that there really is no more direct way to influence student velocity to completion than allowing them to show up at registration and get seats in the courses they most need to graduate.
Very much, both of you. It is very clear from the data that you presented and the way you walked us through it that scheduling is absolutely critical for optimizing the utilization of your faculty time as well as your physical resources. It seems in one of our conversations that we were talking about it being important even down to the minute, and so I guess the question that I would have for you is I mean, does 5 minutes really matter in scheduling? And is getting that granular critical in this need? And while you're answering that, I'd like to invite the audience to please type in questions or raise your hands, and then we'll get to your questions because we're now into the question and answer period. But it seems that it's really down to the minute. I invite either of you to take that.
I'd be happy to address that question. To us, yes, 5 minutes does matter, particularly in those blocks of prime time that I had identified. It matters in 2 ways. It matters to a student, because if a student has a class that is letting out 5 minutes later than other courses, they may not be able to register for the next block of courses because they would not get to that class in time. So from a student perspective, absolutely it matters. From a scheduling perspective, it also matters because 5 minutes, again, a bleed of 5 minutes into the next time block, the next half-hour time block, will take that room offline completely. So that 5 minutes will take the efficiency of being able to offer an additional section. And at our institution, when we did the 2011 first baseline data, we had all different start and end times, even by 5 or 10 minutes in some of our time blocks. And those had been modified through the years, if you will, And that's why it was so essential for us to get back onto a common grid. Now we have most of our gen ed courses on the common grid. We do have our science courses that have their own grid because they don't fit into the exact template as a typical 3-credit gen ed non-lab course. The one interesting point that we learned during that process when we were looking at the science grid in particular is about how carefully our science faculty were optimizing and maximizing the space utilization on their own. And there was a best practice that we discovered institutionally. In fact, our biological science faculty were scheduling Monday through Friday at 85% efficiency rate. And we used that data as part of our facilities master planning process to identify that we needed additional laboratory spaces at our central campus in Bluebell to help provide additional opportunities for those courses, because we were at capacity for growth.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Caitlin, we've got some questions.
Came from one individual. Has Montgomery County Community College seen an increase in program completion that you feel safe attributing at least in part to the refinements you've made to scheduling?
Our completion rate has increased modestly. I would say to give it a direct correlation to scheduling, I would be slightly reserved at the moment because it's still early on. Knowing our student patterns, our full-time students would be benefiting from this scheduling approach because we just began it in spring 2011. So we are starting to realize those benefits, and I think in part and parcel we could contribute it, but I'd be just reserved to put the level of confidence in making it a direct correlation.
And I'll add to that. We are focusing at Astra on doing a better job in helping schools track some metrics that can more directly correlate scheduling to completion and time to completion. One of the metrics we're most interested in is the average credit hour load per student, and we're seeing that creep up in most cases. And then we've seen, in some cases, it can jump pretty significantly. We have one community college that's been able to increase our average credit hour loads up to by 48% on average per student, which is obviously an extreme example. So there can be a correlation, but I think part of it, like anything else, is doing a good job of benchmarking that and truly tracking that longitudinally.
Okay.
We also had a question, do you use the same smart grid at multiple campuses?
Yes, it's an institutional smart grid, and the only deviation would be in our laboratory science courses. We do have guiding principles that they need to follow as closely as possible to a start or an end time within a block. So that way a science course, if it begins at 8 o'clock, it's going to bleed over into a few other sections. But we try to have one institutional smart coding.
And we have one other question.
Have you used Ad Astra to create block schedules for programs?
We have not engaged in that partnership with Astra. We are involved in other projects. Right now we have a project that we are looking at our student planning tools, which will give us additional data based on when students intend to take courses that we'll be integrating into this particular process.
And so just to add to that, there are two ways that we've approached block scheduling. One is the one that Vicki mentioned, that where we pull data from a planning process and integrate it into the course demand analytics. Another is to embed that more directly into the scheduling process through embedded templates that students follow. But the net is the same, is essentially taking some of those complete College America strategies on structured schedules and actually integrating them into the process of rolling out course schedules and road mapping and advising for students.
Unfortunately, we're out of time at this point. We have a number of other questions that people would like the answers to, and I would like to just make a quick note here of the fact that we have included our presenters' contact information in this slide, and this set of slides will be sent to everyone following the webinar. And please feel free to follow up with whatever questions we haven't been able to get to when you receive those. But this was an extremely informative and important webinar, and we'd like to very much thank our presenters. And at this point, I'm going to turn it to Caitlin because we're going to do a quick poll so that we can learn how we can be continuously improving our webinars and what aspects of things are of most value to our audience.
Yes, you should see now on your screen a poll, and just select all the statements with which you agree. This call was useful and informative. I enjoyed the webinar format. This webinar gave me new ideas that we could use. There was enough time for questions and discussion. This call did not meet my expectations. We'll give you a few minutes to answer all those. Okay, great. And we'll now show you your results. Thank you.
Our next webinar is titled Pathway to Leadership Certificates, 7 Habits for College Success, and will feature Alamo colleges in Franklin Covey. It's going to be on November 12th at 12:30. We hope all of you will join us again and invite others who you think would be interested. We invite you to follow up with our presenters and with questions and additional discussion elements. The presenters in our next webinar are going to include Michael Ockley, Director of Higher Education for Franklin Covey, and Dr. Joe Carroll Fabianchi, Vice Chancellor for Academic Success at Alamo Colleges, and Dr. Adelina Silva, Vice Chancellor for Student Success at Alamo Colleges. Registration for that webinar is open now and will be included in a follow-up email. And once again, I'd like to very much thank our presenters for taking the time and the effort to share what works with the rest of the network. That's what Achieving the Dream is all about, and it was a real pleasure to work with you on this. Thanks, everyone, for attending, and we'll look forward to having you join us again next month.